This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Allison Cook, Lindsay Trebet, and Super Inframan. If you'd like to help support the show, you can do so at wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Just a quick word of warning going into the show. The audio on their end was a little noisy, and not really sure what was causing it. Showed up a lot worse in the recordings than we were hearing on our headphones. So in cleaning it up, it has left occasional bits sounding kind of hollow. Nothing more I can do with it. I got rid of the noise, which was probably far more annoying, at least to me. But I apologize up front for the audio quality not being up to par as usual. Next time we have these guys on, we will make sure that is not an issue. And with no further ado, here you go. Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I am welcoming a few members of the Magonia Research Group. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, I am Tom Goodwin. I'm one of the co-founders of the group and a dedicated 14 researcher, as you might imagine.
I am Michael Parish. I am not a founder of the group. He salvaged me out of a Reddit gutter a couple of months ago, and I've been with him ever since.
I have a knack for that.
I'm AP Strange. I'm one of the newest members of the group. They wrangled me into this interview, and happy to be here. So I can give my experience of the last week or two.
All right. And how long has this been a research group?
Oh, this group's actually been it's fairly young, but it's had a very storied history from that genesis point, which was actually February of 2019. So yeah, it's really not been around for long, but we've had some quite high-profile members, such as Albert Rosales and Jose Caravaca. Is it Caravaca or Caracava? Caravaca, I think.
Caravaca, right? Yeah.
Caravaca, yeah. Jose Caravaca. And a certain up-and-coming quantum physicist who I shall decline to name. Yeah, so... Yeah, it's gone from kind of success to success ever since its genesis in February of 2019. And yeah, basically, I don't think any of us were really expecting to end up on this show. So it's a great honor to be here, basically.
Yeah, well, you added me on Twitter, and I'm like, ooh, as soon as I saw the word Magonia, I'm like, who's this? You know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You know, terms like Magonia and Fortean are definitely the things I look for when, you know.
We all have our Pavlovian bells, all of which are self-programmed. I know I do.
Because generally those terms mean that someone is into it in a different way than if someone just lists themselves as a paranormal researcher.
Yeah, or ufologist or ufologist or something. Yeah, and that's normally the way I assume you're looking for.
If someone has one of those words in their self-definition, you can guarantee they don't watch weeknight cable. You know?
Yeah. That's true.
All right. So you guys are based all over the place.
Yeah. We're actually currently an exclusively digital group just because we've got members all around the world, basically. So my co-founder, who couldn't make it today just because of he wanted to maintain his privacy, but my co-founder is from Brazil, and I believe both AP and Michael are in North America, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm in Massachusetts, so yeah.
I am in Appleton, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Sweet.
So what do you guys do? Like as far as research?
So we tend to investigate just all sorts of Fortean case files that we find in various books and across the internet. We have quite a few members who are field investigators and who are kind of archivists of loads of cases. So Albert Rosales is a great example. So it's kind of that sort of thing. Again, I think a lot of us have had some very intriguing personal experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're kind of I'd characterize us as a kind of up-and-coming research group, basically, which does mostly what you'd expect the other research groups to do, but yeah, so we're new, and we're happy to be on the scene, basically.
Okay, all right. Well, let's get into some of you. You've all had personal experiences. Let's talk about yours, Tom.
Okay. So the first experience that I remember was a UFO encounter, which took place when I was about 7 or 8, so quite a while ago, and I was at a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere with one of my friends at the time, and I woke up in the middle of the night, unable to breathe, feeling like there was something kind of pressing down on my chest. And I've never had an asthma attack before or since, so I've got no idea what this was. And eventually, my parents came into the room, and they decided that I should go to hospital. So I was put in the back of the car, and then I was left there momentarily while my mother went off to get changed. And I saw a large globe of red light, kind of entirely self-contained, so not lighting up the sky red. But imagine like holding a basketball, holding a basketball arm's length away from your face. That's roughly how large it was on the horizon. Obviously, perspective, all that. And it did a kind of slow arc up from the horizon and down again. It took about 1 minute to do that. And obviously, that was the most bizarre thing I'd seen at the time, and I was amazed. I'd been into kind of Forteana and all that for quite a while before then. Obviously, I've been into it pretty much all my life, and so yeah, I was stunned having seen a UFO, and but eventually I kind of chalked it up to just a hypnagogic hallucination, or something along those lines, until a couple of years ago, I asked my dad if he'd ever seen anything strange in the sky, and he described looking out of the window of the farmhouse that night and seeing a large red light on the horizon, which was kind of a turning point for how I viewed that experience.
Yeah.
And since then I've had some strange encounters in the forest around my village, such as what sounded like kind of music box music or ice cream van music just coming from the forest, and with no obvious source, and almost mesmeric, kind of hypnotic, weirdly. I remember, like, when I first heard it, I just kind of stood still and it felt like I was dreaming, which was bizarre. Like, kind of the thoughts just went out of my head and I was just listening to this music. And I actually, the second and third times I heard it, I actually managed to get it on camera. Those are my kind of primary experiences. I have had some other more minor things happen, but those are the kind of main ones that are worth noting.
What do you make of that first one with the combination of sleep paralysis and or the Hag syndrome anyway, and the UFO?
Yeah. I really have no idea. Again, because I always chalked it up to just a hallucination. But when we actually got to the hospital, they were testing me to see if anything had gone on. Obviously, I was far too young to understand what was actually going on in the hospital at the time. But so they said that there was nothing they could see which could have caused it. So I don't know. Again, I have had, just to kind of go down the kind of more kind of speculative route with this, I did have a recurring kind of nightmare / kind of image in my head just before I went to sleep when I was younger as well, of like the kind of elf-looking thing with enormous blue eyes looking over me.
Huh.
And I remember it was such a clear image that I can even remember how it smelled, how this elf thing was supposed to smell, like a helium balloon. And it was, so there's that, which kind of could potentially tie into it. But other than that, I have no idea what happened. It was a really strange night.
Huh. Okay. I always wonder if like there's something coming out of the earth itself that is like sort of affecting our consciousness, but also maybe making other things more visible or creating, earth lights or something like that,
Yeah. You mean a bit like Paul Devereaux, was it, with his earth lights?
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if that same energy could affect our consciousness in ways and give us weird experiences.
Yeah. A bit like Keel pointed out in the Mothman Prophecies with the flickering lights and the kind of psychological effect of that, right?
Yeah.
Hallucinogenic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was,
Okay.
Yeah, continue.
Let's move on to Michael. And you also go by Zero, the hero.
Yes.
And you said it's not a Black Sabbath thing?
No, it began actually. I like the number 0 because it denotes neutrality, which to me psychologically signifies calmness, detachment. So I just started calling myself that as like a therapeutic thing. And then I noticed, hey, hero rhymes with 0. I'll add that, just as a joke. And then I remembered it was a Black Sabbath song title. But moving forward, as for my experiences, John Keel posited that we live in our haunted planet. I am a member of a haunted family. When I say haunted, I don't mean ghosts necessarily. I just mean a shared history of bizarre experiences spanning multiple decades, multiple locations, multiple individuals and types of phenomena. It would be impossible for me to relay everything without eating up all your runtime.
Right. And we talked about having you on separately as well to talk about some of those experiences.
Do you just want you just want the cream of the crop right now?
Yeah. Give us that's a good idea.
Okay. I was actually the subject of a blog post by Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and I was also featured prominently in Brad Steiger's final book, Real Visitors, Parallel Dimensions, what have you. He promised me I was going to get a free copy in exchange for my submission. Didn't happen, but here we are. The most significant experience, the most unique experience I can recall was in the summer of either 1995 or 1996. I was either 7 or 8 at the time, and I was fishing with my father in a rural area in northeast Wisconsin in Marinette County. Sun was setting, day was ending. We got skunked that day, so we were about to head back. We got in the truck, we looked over our shoulders, and we saw there was a woman on a horse in British fox hunting clothing. The hat, the boots, the red coat, etc. Just standing there, staring at us with this death stare. As if to say, yeah, you're not supposed to be here. You're an intruder. And what are you even doing here in the first place? And then we looked away. We're like, what was that? And then we looked back, and she was gone, without a sound, without a trace. This is bizarre for a number of reasons. Namely, this was in the United States. This was not in the UK. There is not, nor has there ever been, a stable in the area. There are no horse paths in the area. No smooth paths that a horse could walk on. It's all gnarled forest. Logically, we could have expected to hear horses' hooves as she pulled up, and horses' hooves as she departed, but we heard nothing. It was as if she just disappeared into thin air. And even if she were there, even if this were a mundane person on a mundane horse, we would still expect to hear horses' hooves, still be able to see her from the distance. But no, she was just gone in an instant. Very, very bizarre. The only thing I can compare it to was the one story from Steiger's Shadow World, where the college student in Minnesota stops and he joins a quote unquote Scandinavian folk festival or Scandinavian reunion or whatever it was. You remember that one?
I don't know, not off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah, but that's, if you have that book in your collection, if you want to look that up, it was eerily similar to that.
So it was kind of like, not only was it sort of a weird apparition, but it was an out-of-place apparition as well.
Yes. Yeah, I got the impression that it was not human, that it was something else, like a fae or an elemental type being, assuming that form for whatever reason. It's worth noting that this occurred within the vicinity of McClintock Park, which is a public park, locally notorious. There was a double murder there in 75 that was not solved until recently, that is home to strange phenomena, orbs. A couple of years later, one night in the summer of 1997, my father was fishing there by himself. And one night, when suddenly the Oz factor, Jenny Randall's term, kicked in, time stopped, natural sound stopped, eerie silence, and then this overwhelming sense of being watched and of being disapproved of being told, you're an intruder and you need to go now, and he did. Years later, probably in 2010, a friend of mine and I were hiking in the back section of the park, which is heavily wooded. This was in broad daylight on a Saturday afternoon, and it was the same thing. Sound stopped, time dilated, felt like we were being watched, being followed, like something was going to leap out at us at any time. When we turned around and got back to the parking lot, we checked the time on his cell phone. We finally got the reception back. We thought we'd been gone for an hour, 2 hours, 20 minutes.
Huh.
Just 20 minutes. Total Rip Van Winkle. Total, if you've ever seen the movie Picnic at Hanging Rock.
Yeah.
Total Algernon Blackwoods, the Willows. Total just Patrick Harper panic, you know?
Huh.
In that area. Later on, I learned the entire area is underlaid with granite, which we know is a conductor of piezoelectricity, and that plays into this phenomena or some manifestations of it.
Okay. Huh. Well, we'll have you on to do a thorough, show on all your different experiences.
All right.
Let's
up for that.
Let's move over to AP Strange.
Hey, yeah, okay. For personal experiences, I used to like to say I grew up in a haunted house, but I don't know that necessarily describes it all that well. I encountered two luminous entities at the end of my bed when I was probably 4 or 5 that asked me a series of questions before floating out the window. That was probably the earliest experience, but... What kind of questions? Very mundane questions. They asked me who I was, so I just gave them my full name, like any child is trained to do, Right. Somebody asks you, asks your name, you give them your full name, first, middle, and last, which later when I was reading about fairies, I realized that that's not a good thing to do if you are dealing with the fae. You shouldn't tell them your full name. But right. I did, so that might explain my life of weirdness. It was reminiscent to me of, in some UFO cases, particularly there was one in upstate New York that happened the same day as the Wani Zamora case, where they asked about fertilizer. They asked really, they ask why you're digging a hole, or
one which was in Passport to Magonia, I believe.
Right. Just very, very mundane questions about and practical questions about what you're doing and what's going on, So it was similar in nature to that. They asked where I was, and when I said it was my bedroom, I said, I live here. This is my bedroom. This is where I sleep. That's kind of when they left. It was almost like I claimed the place and they had to go. So, but the place had a lot of poltergeist activity the whole time I was growing up. And all the while I was taking in all the media I could on any subject of the weird. I wanted to be a cryptozoologist when I was a small kid, but I got into the UFOs and the ghosts and everything after that.
Okay, all right. So have you had lifelong experiences too?
Oh yeah, I mean the poltergeist activity never really stopped for most of my adulthood, and it kind of waxes and wanes. But in recent years, it hasn't happened much at all. But it seemed to kind of follow me everywhere I went. So I kind of think it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, poltergeist activity is probably generated by us on some level.
That's kind of what I came to believe at one point. But it was like a recurring spontaneous psychokinesis sort of deal. But
I mean, I guess it's possible another entity can use that energy as well.
Yeah, and it's also possible for your mind to develop a separate part of itself and to externalize something going on inside you. Because growing up, it always seemed like it was an external force.
Yes. Yeah, when I have poltergeist activity, I treat it as an external force, even though I assume it's part of me.
I do as well, where you almost talk to it, say, why are you going to do that right now?
Exactly.
Because sometimes it just makes a mess, and now you got to clean it up, So, it was an interesting thing to grow up with, and I noticed it did sometimes manifest if people doubted my stories about it. If I was telling a story and they didn't believe me, then it would manifest right then, almost as though to prove a point.
Nice.
So, but like I said, it hasn't happened in quite a while. But
and the waxing and waning, I always find interesting. I mean, that could be emotional, or you look at Robert Schoch's work on psi research, where he correlated the researchers doing psi research in the lab over the last 100 years, and showing that they did better when there was high solar activity.
So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
and I suppose if you were in a charged place, if there was something about the environment you were in. I also think emotional states play into it heavily. So
yes, definitely.
Times of stress is when I would notice it more,
But I wonder if it strengthens also, based on that.
Strengthened
based on solar activity.
Oh, it could. Yeah, it could. I mean, I imagine that affects the general electromagnetic fields of the Earth and all that other stuff. So I tend to think that these things ride currents like that. Manifestations of it or side effects of it.
All right. Well, let's get into some of the stuff you guys have been researching. You just want to jump in with some of the stuff you found most interesting recently?
So, okay. So, well, one of the things which I think is a great achievement of the group, which is unfortunately made by an ex-member, so I'm not quite sure if I'm safe to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that, if that's all right, Seriah?
Yeah.
But is that, the man from Torred case? The one where the guy shows up in the Japanese airport and claiming to be from a non-existent country?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Classic.
Yes. There's been obviously it's kind of notorious for having a massive hunt for the source for that. And this ex-member was able to track down the source. And so we now know he was about to reveal the name of the man from Taurus, then he didn't, which was something which he had a habit of doing, like starting off with a topic and then just dropping it. yeah, so he did actually show us the relevant book, and I am just quickly searching through our chat history to try and find it. Yeah, wait a second. Okay.
Yeah, that is
so
interesting. Classically, that kind of was an echo chamber story where it just kind of bounced around and you weren't really sure where it popped up first.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
So, it is apparently a book by Jacques Bergier. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Bergier? No?
Is it French?
It's French, yeah. I'm probably butchering that. Sorry. Basically, sorry. But basically, the reason why no one was able to track down the original Torred story is because they spelt it wrong.
Oh.
In the original in the book, which was the supposed original source, which I believe was just some kind of strange people book that was released as a series of two. Can't remember quite who wrote it, but they spelt it wrong. They got the A and the U in the name the wrong way round, and as a result, anyone searching for the Torred story should have been searching for the Tuareg story, and so no one was able to find it. And yes, we were able to find it. Also, we have a sorry, just drinking tea. We have a member of the group who's a bit of a computer whiz, and he's been able to create a bot which can put things through Alan Greenfield's Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can basically automatically now on our chat type in a command and get the value for Euphanaut names and things. And various interesting things have come of this, including one which was, I believe, that we got. Now, again, I can't quite remember, but I believe that we got something like Helia and Point Pleasant have the same value, which is very interesting, which is a neat little coincidence, or synchronicity, as the case may be. Yeah, basically, again, our group has kind of gone from strength to strength. We've included loads of different members throughout our run, including Carl Grove, who's a researcher of time slips specifically, which has been very interesting. We've got Albert Rosales has uploaded his so he's still working on the Humanoid Encounters series, and he's uploaded a series of PDFs to our group, which has been very helpful. We also had, briefly, Michael D. Winkle, I believe that's his name, on, who is the author of a book called I Heard of That Somewhere, which is a great kind of, it almost feels like a modern Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. And so that was very intriguing. Again, sadly, he's inactive now. Yeah. So in general,
with this story in the Japanese airport, does it say in that book where that came from?
Oh Lord, sorry, I skipped over that entirely. No, so that actually came from a real incident which happened, but it was a lot less mysterious. And so basically, this guy showed up. Everybody assumed, and quite possibly rightly so, looking at the context of the story, that he was just a scammer trying to get into the country with a fake passport.
Mm-hmm.
And which is the kind of classic mundane explanation for the Torred case, but it seems that this one was true. So he was eventually actually. It is interesting to consider how the story actually ends, because the story the story that's passed around online is that he was put in the hotel room and then he vanished, right?
Okay.
And the actual ending of the story is that he ends up in a mental facility, and like a psychiatric facility, and so apparently he gave talks to the press quite a lot. We haven't got those reports here, unfortunately. Just like we don't have his name, but it seems that if we do a bit more digging into this one angle, we'll be able to find his name, probably find all the stuff that he's said to the press. Am I speaking too fast?
No, you're fine.
No, good. So yeah, he actually ends up in a hospital, and seemingly, but that could imply that he's not dropping his story, which is very
Right.
interesting, because that would again still imply that there's something weird going on. So while the ex-member posited it as a debunking of the Torred story, I think I'm more on the side that this legitimizes it a little bit, actually. Because now we have the original source, and the original source does seem to suggest that there was something at least going on with this.
It wasn't
As
an
opposed
urban
to-
legend.
Yeah, that it wasn't just an urban legend, which it definitely seems like with the kind of mainstream telling of the story. But in the original Bergier, again, that's going to really annoy me. The pronunciation of that guy's name. He wrote Morning of the Magicians.
Yeah, I think it's Bergier.
Bergier, yes, thank you. Sorry. Bergier. And so now that we have the original source for that, we can probably do some more digging to actually find the man's name, which would be very intriguing.
All right. Michael, what about some of your favorite cases?
To be honest, I focus more on the control system, or in literary terms, Philip K. Dick's Valis, or William Burroughs' The Nova Mob. Basically, how the phenomena shapes human history, human culture over time. Certain things I have found that are fascinating is just the sheer amount of cultural items that were inspired in some way by spirit contact, by communication with disincarnates. For instance, Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, was an avid Ouija board user who claimed that he had contacted spirit guides through the device, and it was their teachings, their instruction that inspired his organization. At the same time, Napoleon Hill, the early self-help guru, the author of Think and Grow Rich, claimed he was in council with spirit guides, spirit entities, teachers, and that they inspired his writings. And it's interesting to me, if you read his work and that of Dale Carnegie, When Friends Influence People, how much of that stuff is a kind of low-grade ceremonial magic? And
How so?
The emphasis on visualization, on setting goals, visualizing them in order to make them a reality, it's very similar to techniques taught in ceremonial magic. Sleight of mind. Setting a goal, forgetting it, and then letting it happen. It's not directly the same, but it is very similar in some ways to the practice of sigils, the use of sigils as pioneered by Austin Osman Spare, which would later on go on to become a fixture of chaos magic beginning in the 90s. It is eerily similar, and then you look, you see how this influence has shown up in even the most unexpected places in contemporary Christianity, in the prosperity gospel. Manly Palmer Hall noted this similarity, noted this connection as early as the 1950s. Those kind of things interest me. Other things that interest me, the impact on artists and creative people. Concepts like download. Oh, go on.
I was going to say, and artists and creative people are more likely to experience this phenomena, it seems.
Yes, the anti-structural life.
Yeah.
I've noticed in the phenomena of downloads, creative downloads, what's his name? Joseph Hellier, the author of Catch-22, claimed, it's, the book was already written. I just came across it first. James Brown said the same thing about his songs. Robert Plant, in the writing of Stairway to Heaven, another one. Apparently, it just wrote itself through kind of a simple form of automatic writing. I'm interested in asking, where are these things coming from? Where are they being created, and by whom? before they are downloaded into these people's heads? And why are they the ones chosen to transmit them?
Right.
For what purpose? Is there some kind of genetic or some kind of spiritual component to them that the phenomena is attracted to? I don't know. Other examples, back to William Burroughs. You familiar with his claims of the angry spirit?
No.
Okay. It was interesting to me. He claimed that in early childhood, he felt a presence attached to his home, attached to his person, in his life in general. He felt very hopeless, like it was controlling him, it was influencing him. Later on, in adulthood, when he accidentally murdered his wife, Jean Valmer, in the drunken game William Tell down in Mexico, he would blame what he then was calling the ugly spirit for that. And then he said that through that he was indirectly responsible for starting his writing career. He hadn't accidentally blown her head off, he wouldn't have become a writer. And then when we look at him, we look at his influence on the Beat generation and on the 60s counterculture in general. Again, we see the same theme of some kind of external influence, some kind of weird non-human agency that will tap into one individual, and then that individual will go on to tap into so many others.
Yeah.
It's speculation, yeah, but it's just so common and so prevalent, it's impossible not to notice. More recent and more popular examples, Stephen King's Randall Flagg character appeared fully formed in his mind's eye in 1967 when he was in the college library. Harry Potter appeared fully formed in J.K. Rowling's mind's eye on a train ride in 1994. Even Twilight, as silly as it is to bring up Twilight, Stephanie Meyer first encountered Edward Cullen and Bella fully formed having a conversation in a dream of hers.
Interesting.
So it's like, it makes you look at the arts and at entertainment, even really crude mass entertainment, in a new way. When you put on a movie, what are you really watching?
Right.
When you put on a song, what are you really hearing? That really gets me.
Well, I do think there are minor plagiarism arguments for the Stairway to Heaven song.
Yes. And for Twilight.
Huh?
And for Twilight too, I believe. But I'm
really?
not. I was never a teenage girl, so I'm not inclined to look at it.
Well, to be fair, I don't think the plagiarism with Stairway to Heaven had to do with the lyrics. It was more the music.
Yeah,
so I think Robert Plant's in the clear. It's still a good example. Yeah, Jimmy Page was stealing stuff. While he was at the Luskin House.
Yeah.
Just quickly, something which I just remembered was Alan Moore's idea of a quote idea space as somewhere where characters live.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Which definitely reminds me of that, where you said the thing about Edward Cullen and that, and all those characters, and also obviously Alan Moore actually alleged to have an encounter with a person looking a lot like his character, John Constantine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just have one more to share. This is interesting. If you're familiar with the exegesis of Philip K. Dick,
yeah,
how he kind of got sucked into this in the early 70s, if you want to interpret it that way. The pink light that he described, that kickstarted the whole saga for him. It's interesting to me that John Keel claims also to have experienced a vision of pink light early in his life. Those kinds of connections I always look out for. Same thing with scientists, inventors.
We've done a number of episodes on the strangeness of light phenomena, because light phenomena seems to go through all this stuff.
It reminds me a bit of
Yes.
The work of William Corliss with his anomaly source books. I think he's done quite a few books on light phenomena, I believe.
Oh, okay. I know the author. I didn't realize he did that.
Oh yeah, he's done all sorts of things. There's like anthropological anomalies.
Huge catalogs of naturally occurring phenomena. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one on my shelves here, which is the Unfathomed Mind, a handbook of unusual mental phenomena. Got enormous stuff about Uri Geller and all that.
Yeah.
Uri Geller's an interesting one.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Because you know he was faking some of it, but that's, comes down to why was he faking some of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And why was he hanging out with Buharic,
And that was who?
Andreja Puharic. He was a scientist, parapsychologist, sort of, that got way into UFOs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Colin Wilson actually reported hearing a story of a really bizarre experience involving UFOs and kind of proper like Keelian kind of tape manipulation, like in the Mothman prophecies.
Yeah, exactly.
Where with poltergeist activity surrounding a UFO visitation experienced by Geller. Let me just get it off my shelf for a minute.
Well, that was actually how they channeled the beings from I guess flying saucers or the UFOs would still be in the parlance at the time. They would leave the tape deck out, and it would the message would appear on the tape without them recording it. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And to me, that always makes me wonder if they're psychically projecting it there without realizing it.
Well, there's always been a lot of overlap between spiritualism and channeling entities from space. It's almost the same thing, arguably.
Yeah.
You could make that
definitely.
argument.
Definitely connected phenomena, if not the same thing.
So AP, what about you? I know you're particularly interested in Ashtar and Phantom Clowns.
Yeah, those are just the two things I've been talking about recently.
It's also the name of my garage band.
Ashtar and the Phantom Clowns. Yeah.
Ashtar and Phantom Clowns.
Featuring Zero the Hero. That works.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the hit single that's going to be released from Magonia Research Group. Yeah, no, the bulk of my research in the past year or two has been with a singular case and one UFO researcher / theosophist. So the Ashtar stuff comes from the broadcast interruption in 1977 in southern England. The ITV broadcast interruption where it was a message from space and an alien that sometimes people hear as Vrilon or Astron or Grahama. Everybody hears something different, but you can find the video on YouTube. For 5.5 minutes or thereabouts, interrupted the news broadcast that night, and nobody's ever had a really good, satisfactory explanation for what exactly happened there. So that was kind of the jumping off point for my research on that, and extensively talking to a guy that investigated it at the time, who's become a good friend of mine in England. He was working alongside a guy named Rex Dutta that people don't seem to talk about ever now. So it kind of turned into a research project about this guy in particular and his interesting life story. So that's been the bulk of what that's been the mainstay of my research in the past year or two.
There's more to the Ashtar story, though, isn't there? Didn't that go on to like form a cult or something?
Well, it preceded that event and succeeded it. That was actually a turning point in the Ashtar stuff around that time. Anyway,
okay, I didn't realize it preceded it as well.
Oh yeah, that goes back to I'm gonna be wrong if I try to say what year, but it was George Van Tassel, I think, was the first to communicate with Ashtar. And then there was a dispute. The Reverend Bob Short was involved with the Ashtar stuff in the early days at Giant Rock. And after a while, Van Tassel abandoned the name of Ashtar and didn't talk to Ashtar anymore. I guess he and Ashtar had a falling out, but but Ashtar is just a name within contactee lore that's never gone away. You know, it's always resurfaced in some way, shape, or form.
And that still exists, right?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, it does. I mean, there are actually Twitter accounts devoted to devotion of Ashtar.
He's a favorite of New Age fruit flakes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, ever since Tuella took up the mantle in the late 70s, early 80s, then you had the Project World evacuation stuff where they were saying the world was going to come to an end. I think either in the 90s or might have been 1990 actually, but they had to keep pushing back the date because the world kept failing to end. So, but Project World evacuation was all about being in touch with Ashtar Galactic Command and this galactic federation of space people from a variety of different planets all over the galaxy and beyond that would help evacuate the people from Earth that contacted them. So you kind of had to be in the group to get contact to get on the lifeboat out of here. But yeah, so I mean, Ashtar has undergone a variety of different followers over the years and different uses of that name. So it's a particularly strong one to invoke when you're researching something. Now, like I said, the message that came through that night in 1977 was the voice was so distorted it was hard to make out. But it does sound like he's saying this is the voice of Vrillon from Ashtar Command. That other people might have interpreted it differently. So that's the only reference to Ashtar that I'm working with. But it still has me like looking into all the cases before and after.
It should also be noted that Ashtar appears in a number of ancient religions as a deity, or the name of a deity, or different variations thereof.
Yeah,
Ishtar.
Right.
Which, in my eyes, kind of furthers the link between ancient religions and this phenomena. I see cattle mutilations as also strengthening that link. You know, kind of
absolutely.
A modern day blood sacrifice. What we no longer give them voluntarily, they take.
Well, the old ancient Dionysian cults used to sacrifice a bull as part of their ritual, you know, so maybe the cattle mutilation is the Space Brothers doing the same thing.
and what do you guys think of the whole connection with blood?
Ooh, that is intriguing. I remember I actually came up with a kind of spitball theory that the whole connection with blood and kind of emotional triggering and manipulation of a lot of these entities, along with kind of blood sacrifice and the blood draining things because of hormones, potentially. Like the hormones released during specific emotional states and then feeding on those chemicals in the blood. But that was kind of just a kind of spitball thing. But it's definitely really interesting to see the connection with. Continue.
I think we should also allow the possibility that the connection is more mundane than that, is more prosaic than that it could just be due to the chemical properties in blood. For instance, I don't mean to sound vulgar here, but Seriah, do you remember the blogger Jeff Wells?
No.
Rigorous Intuition?
Nope.
He was a Fortean and a conspiracist, popular on the internet in the 2000s. And once again, I don't mean to sound vulgar or gross here, but he posted an article years ago where he drew a connection between Kenneth Grant and John Keel. It was the quote from the Mothman Prophecies where he talked about, the phenomena has a near pornographic preoccupation with our sexual lives and has the ability to ferret out human females in their menstrual period.
Right.
And he links that to some of the more bizarre doctrines of Kenneth Grant, how to use human reproductive fluid to open gateways, outer gateways, in his terminology, allowing for the preternatural intelligences to manifest in corporeal form, yada, yada, yada. And that is a very good, in my opinion, a very good connection to make. The one I've never read anyone else make. The idea that it could just be a mundane physics thing. Something in blood assists the phenomena doing what it does. I don't.
Well, that's what I tend to think. I think that some of the phenomena, whether it be entities or intelligences, that lack a form, that have no physical form, in our conventional understanding of physics and three-dimensional space. So they need to borrow some organic or biological material in order to manifest it all. So, or maybe just to stay manifested in our dimension of reality.
Isn't there a whole thing with medieval succubi and incubi borrowing human corpses?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also there are various I'm trying to remember their name, but yes, there are various vampiric creatures in the mythology of India.
Well, right. If you look
human corpses.
Yeah, if you look into the history of vampire lore, traditionally they didn't have a physical form. They weren't leaving the grave as a corporeal revenant and coming in and sucking your blood and then walking around like a normal person. A lot of the times, the legends would have them as taking the form of an animal or not having a physical form. Just kind of like a ghostly thing that just floats into your room and sucks your blood. But then they could develop a form after that. They could become stronger, So if you look at the old, if you look into,
I didn't know that either.
The Montague Summers books on vampires are pretty great because he actually really believed in all the stuff. So, are you guys familiar with him?
I know the name.
The Reverend Montague Summers.
Yeah, I know the name.
Vaguely.
Oh, The Vampire is Kiss and Kin. I have that. I haven't read it yet.
Okay, that's the book I'm referring to. So that's the one you'll want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, when I first started in this field years ago, one of the very first articles I ever read was by Laura Knight, the Polish surname, married name that I cannot pronounce. But I think you know who I'm referring to. Laura Knight, jazz chick. The
one who did like the high strangeness of abductions and densities. All of that. I think, would I be correct in saying she claimed contact with Cassiopeians?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. That book has been out of print for as long as I can remember. It's the only work of hers I've ever been able to read. It's just her articles online. But the article, which is still online, by the way, on multiple websites, is titled something like Vampires, ETs, and Blood, Legend of the Vampire, something like that, where she delves pretty heavily into this territory. I remember reading that years ago.
Yeah, it is funny how the old-fashioned monsters come back around. Because you think about the universal monsters of like Dracula and the Wolfman, and like but the vampirism aspect never really goes away with the phenomenon. It makes its way back in. And like with the Wolfman, it's like we got all these Dogman reports now, which isn't too much different from like the old werewolf lore and all that stuff,
No.
So it is funny.
A very good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm waiting for a mummy. Like if a mummy shows up somewhere.
There are urban legends and there are various claims floating around about mummy-like entities, but that's the kind of the one classical monster that's really missing is definitely the mummy.
Well, there aren't a lot of mummies out there, so
Brendan Fraser took care of all of them.
Well, yeah, that's one of my bucket list things is I want to fight a mummy. Just to be able to say I did it.
So, AP, you've also been researching phantom clowns.
Well, I did for a while, and I think Zero has too. That's it's just a fascinating. It's so bizarre and weird as a phenomenon. And I think it really gets to the heart of the most absurd and terrifying aspects of whatever the phenomena is. I have a theory that some of the most unbelievable and absurd sounding stories are probably the best indicators of what the actual truth is behind any of this.
Yeah, definitely.
So I see like Jeff the Mongoose as like a great one,
Yep.
And Phantom Clowns is in that same category, clowns that shouldn't, with the original Phantom Clown wave in 1981, that was recorded by Lauren Coleman, in Mysterious America. It was in the Boston area that these clowns were driving around in a busted up van with broken headlights and trying to abduct kids, and were never caught by the police and never seen by anyone but the kids that were being abducted, or trying to abduct. Like, how would you get away with that?
Yeah, you would think in a major urban area, a group of clowns, of all things, in broad daylight, in a junker vehicle without a license plate, that would stick out like a sore thumb.
Near a school,
Yeah.
Or perhaps the Boston Police Department was just that incompetent at the time.
Yeah, I mean, see, I don't live too far from Boston. I am in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is a small state. So, I being in Boston and just the traffic there, you're not making a getaway anywhere, even if you can fade into a crowd.
Yeah, and it's so counterintuitive to. It's like, okay, you got guys dressed up like clowns in a beater car with a stepladder on the back. How do you expect to entice a child into coming with you with that?
Right.
As your gimmick, as your angle. I mean, you don't even have candy to sweeten the deal, nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Didn't one of them actually end up having a devil T-shirt on?
Yes.
Had a devil T-shirt and then nothing on his lower half.
Yeah, no pants or underwear.
No,
wow.
That to me, it's like, that to me sounds like it could very easily be a human pervert.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm thinking, no, because a human pervert would be fully clothed in case they get busted. They don't want it to be even more embarrassing than it already is.
Yeah, so Michael, that's where your interest was lying with it, right? Is really figuring out who these witnesses were and getting to the bottom of the actual
they
encounters.
Would all be middle-aged adults by now. Their parents, if they're still alive, would all be seniors. So would the school officials. But I would like to, interview them on the basis, do like an oral history type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, the newspaper accounts of the time, I did dig up one from the point where the clowns were in Kansas City. But when you're dealing with victims of a crime, especially when they're children, the newspaper isn't going to print the names. No. So you have the police officers' names. The police officers' names are in there, but not the victims, obviously, or the almost victims, the ones that. So
borderline victims.
Right. So with this show, it's actually probably a good way to put the call out. You could say if anybody did see Phantom Clowns in the early 80s or any time, let us know at the MRG.
But I think you need to put it in a sociological context. You remember this is the early 80s when at the time in our culture, concern over the welfare of children was just becoming like a big thing.
Right.
This is the same era that you saw the disappearance of Johnny Gotch in Des Moines, Iowa. This was the same era you had the Atlanta child murders of Wayne Williams. This is the same era they started putting kids' faces on milk cartons.
Yeah, and it was around the time of John Wayne Gacy, who actually was a clown. So
he was convicted in 1980, so he was still in the public consciousns at the time.
Yeah, so it could have been copycats of Gacy, but you still wonder how they got away with it,
Yeah, and how was it that there were so many of them in so many places across the country?
Yeah.
And why did it look like whatever this was moving south and west and then abruptly stopping?
Yeah.
Halfway across the country from where it began.
So do you think that this kind of stuff could be a mass sort of tulpa from our society?
An expression of the anxieties of the culture, maybe. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, that was Carl Jung's idea about flying saucers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the saucer shape was supposed to, in some psychoanalytical way, represent our anxieties about mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
And ever since, that's all you've ever heard in every documentary about UFOs is it was the height of the Cold War.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carl Jung, for ending conversations before they start.
There was also, I can't remember his first name, Willette. He put out a book called Illuminations, postulating that mass UFO sightings were akin to poltergeist experiences.
I think there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah.
I don't know about the other guys, but
Yeah,
I agree.
it was Eric Owlett, I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Yes, it's Willette.
Oulette. Wow, I'm crap at pronunciations. I mean, I'm bad at pronunciations.
I only know because I talked to him.
Yeah.
it's okay, Tom. I think you just need some French lessons. That's all.
Yeah.
The French names throw you for a loop.
They do. Yeah.
Okay. So what other stuff are you guys working on?
Other stuff we are working on currently. So I have a website, or actually several, where I write articles based on so obviously I research cases and write articles about said cases, as one would expect. Yeah, my kind of most active site is unfortunately hosted by Wikia, which isn't very professional. And I'm planning to make the move over to Blogspot very soon. So yeah, if you want to put like the link in the description or something for that, that'd be great. So one of the recent cases I wrote was about a encounter with the Fae in Oregon. A small family basically went to a holiday house on the Oregon coast, and they the youngest of the family started talking about the little men that lived in the room lived in the back room of the house. And eventually the activity escalated until the point where the parents, or the dad specifically, convinced that his daughter was actually talking about rats, put down a rat trap, and then one of the small entities ended up getting caught in the trap, which was very interesting. And so then now this story is kind of dubious because the only source is The Inhumanoids by Barton M. Nunnally, which you may or may not know.
No, I don't.
Yeah, and he has. Yeah, there have been some cases where he's featured, obviously not maliciously, but he has featured cases which are debunked as hoaxes, such as the Crockham Grange vampire, which isn't a real story. Turns out, again, I could have fooled me, but yeah, it's not real. And so I don't know what his source for that is, but so the little man gets trapped in the rat cage and rat trap, and then says if it's rats they want, it's rats they'll get. And at which point dozens and dozens of rats appear in the house, which is something which you'd think couldn't happen outside of a fairy tale, which is why I'm kind of skeptical of the story. But
yeah.
It's still a very kind of dramatic Fae manifestation, which is the sort that, if you're to believe the historical stories, you really don't see anymore.
Yeah.
Which was definitely intriguing to read.
And when was that from?
When was that from? It was the late 90s, 1996, I believe. So,
okay.
Yeah, so actually surprisingly recent. And
not the type of thing you would think someone would make up.
Yeah, it's a very, very strange. They actually nailed a lot of the Fae behaviours. So the younger girl, again, the girl who, like with poltergeist things, the Fae activity seems to be focused around her. And so she, the first thing they reported was the family was out on a walk through the mountains, and they were on this very narrow path, and a strange mist descended on them almost immediately. And the older girl of the family was able to follow her parents' voices back to them, whereas the younger girl just seemed to have disappeared. When the fog lifted, the younger girl turned up behind them, which shouldn't have been possible because the path's really narrow with forests on each side. And and when they asked her what had happened, she said that the little men had taken her up into the air, and that she had flown over the family without hearing them calling for her, which is again a kind of fun back to missing 411, and that she'd just been deposited behind them, which is something which again I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because I know that I will. But there's a Scottish legend, I believe, about like clouds of fairies who'd come out at night and steal people away into the sky. This isn't the Wild Hunt; it's a different thing where I'm sure that you've seen it in the 14 Times review of Joshua Cutchin's Thieves in the Night, with that cloud of fairies snatching a baby away from the mother. It's an old kind of old illustration.
Yeah,
seen it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, and so it's really interesting to see if this report is a hoax. Then how did they know this kind of specific aspect of the behavior? And the mist and the kind of not hearing the voices calling, which is again ties back to Paulides and missing 411. And it's a very interesting story. There could be arguments made on both sides for whether or not it's legitimate. But so that was the most recent article I wrote. I'm actually currently halfway through writing one about a succubus case which occurred in Delhi, India, and in which the witness was woken up from his sleep by a gust of wind and saw something shadowy crawling through his window out from the city, and it basically kind of hovered over the top of his brother, and just kind of stayed there for a bit before leaving, crawling back out of the room, and then his brother felt drained. Of course he did in the morning, and so it's like a classic succubus / I believe the term which is kind of applied to those things just because of popular culture is striga, or that's Albanian or Romanian, but it's a witch of some description which is described as doing that. And I've got all sorts of cases coming down the pipeline, basically.
Okay. What do you guys make of the missing 411 stuff?
Ooh, that is interesting.
I think there's a lot of interesting cases there. It does boggle the mind. The disappearances are some of the most eerie things. Just to think you could hit a trail and go out into the woods, and not come back and have nobody know what happened to you. As far as the particular stuff in the books, I can't afford Paulides' books, so
neither can I.
So I have to go by what I hear in the interviews, and
right.
And as a concept, I think people tend to use missing 411 just now to mean like disappearing, Yes.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of really great disappearance cases out there. And you really do have to wonder. I think actually the most recent issue of 48 Times has one about people just kind of falling into a hole and disappearing. That phenomena where people just kind of seem to fall and that are gone forever,
Huh. I've not heard of that.
Really? Oh, I mean, some of them might be apocryphal stories, but you hear stories about somebody seeing their family member out in a field, and they seem to trip, and then they just never come back. They're just gone. And one of the best,
Ambrose Bierce, I believe.
One of my favorite disappearance stories is not too far from me, in an area called the Bennington Triangle in Vermont. So there's a Glastonbury Mountain is where there were a lot of disappearances, a rash of them in the 1950s. One of them had a guy get on a bus, like an older gentleman got on the bus to leave town, and when it arrived at its destination, without making any stops anywhere, he wasn't on the bus anymore. Like people saw him board the bus.
I think I've heard that one, yeah.
Yeah, that one just blows my mind. Like he just vanished from the bus somehow. You know.
And Tom, you also mentioned phantom strangers.
Yes. So Phantom Stranger is a term which we use in the MRG for entities like the Men in Black. So creatures which look human-ish, but have bizarre behaviour and seem to show up in conjunction with other phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, it's just kind of term which we think would probably be helpful. Where you group entities like the Men in Black and the Black-Eyed Kids and the Mad Gassers, kind of. So these kind of strange characters which just seem to show up and then disappear. So it's not necessarily a Man in Black, but if it's a bizarre person or person quote unquote that shows up around these phenomena and just creeps people out in general and then just disappears. That's the term we've given the term Phantom Stranger, which is actually a homage to DC Comics, but is a term which I think works pretty well for them. And so yeah, obviously we've categorized loads of cases of John Keel's Phantom Photographers, all under the category, all of that.
A cousin of mine had a very impactful Phantom Stranger encounter years ago. This was in the summer of 2000, and he was only 11, going on 12 at the time. Keep in mind, this took place in a very small town called Waupun, Wisconsin. Postcard town. At the time, it was a Sunday night around sunset. He and his friend were bicycling. They came to the town park, public park, where they saw a figure sitting at the pavilion, under the pavilion, at a desk, or at the picnic at a table. My mind is kind of scrambled now. With an art set, painting. So curious, they drew close, and they noticed that it's a woman dressed in what he would later describe as gypsy-esque clothing. Thrift store, colorful, mismatched, somewhat ragged. And she calls out to them, in a voice that he said was fake sound, artificial, like an automated voice you would hear on an answering machine.
Huh.
So they get closer, and they notice that she's painting celestial bodies, moods, and stars with different facial expressions, showing different emotions. Still, we don't really know what that was. They notice she's barefoot. They notice she's speaking in this droning automated voice. She's also staring through them as if they weren't even there. Eyes are completely blank. Body movements are stiff, awkward, robotic. And she looks, as a whole, plastic. Like a mannequin come to life. Like her hair looked like a wig. Lips and eyebrows look painted on. And she's just asking them very generic questions. Like, oh, what are you doing? Things like that. They get this sick feeling in their stomachs. Like, if we hang around here any longer, something bad's going to happen to us. It's about to go down. So they take off, go back to his house, which is less than 2 minutes away, where his father's inside watching an NBA event. They go back out, and she's gone without a trace. Mind you, she was barefoot in a park. It was grass, a cement sidewalk. She had a full art set. No vehicle visible in the vicinity. And any way you turn, any way you look, she still would have been visible.
Right.
On any of the sidewalks, and yet she wasn't. Very eerie. Yeah, that I remember he first told me that. Shortly after it happened, he swears by it to this day. Very eerie.
What do you guys make of the Black-Eyed Kids?
I don't want to meet any.
I
Yeah.
read
Yeah,
I read
That's
Weatherly's book on the subject, and no offense to him, because I've listened to interviews with him. I like him as a person. I like reading the book for the stories in it, but there isn't much depth to it in
Yeah.
terms of research or speculation. I mean, nothing that you couldn't gather from a 5-minute, paranormal.about.com browse.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think. It has a lot of motifs we're all familiar with. Threes,
Yeah.
appearing in groups of three, usually one leader in the center, flanked by two flunkies, two sidekicks. Some kind of ploy to gain access to your home or your person.
Yeah, requiring the permission, usually.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's another vampire thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a screen memory aspect to them. Like, people never notice the eyes. That's always the addendum to the story. That's the point where they realize that something's going on, almost as though they were transfixed and made to not notice the eyes until all of a sudden they did. And they go, ooh, close the door, So,
Also, the mechanical and awkward movements and manner of speech are very redolent to the Men in Black. The way they do not seem entirely conversant with our norms, that to me exudes Men in Black. The one incident where the kid didn't know what a doorknob was, the one where he referred to dinner as food time.
Right. Yeah.
Or they don't know what a cell phone is. They want to come in to use the phone, and you try to hand them a cell phone, and they're just, no, I need to use your phone.
Yeah.
I think I have heard stories about Men in Black being nearby when there's black-eyed kids.
Really?
As well.
I heard one story where there was like a car that pulled up in a driveway.
I think we're thinking of the same one. Yeah.
Yeah. One time when they were at someone's doorstep, and basically he intervened and said, "Hey, come back to the car. Abort mission. We're done here."
Yeah. No, we're thinking of the same one for sure.
Yeah.
How much of the Men in Black stuff do you think is really just actual people?
Some of it.
Yeah, definitely some of it, but I think it should be kind of fairly easy to tell, just based on like their behavior and how they appear and all of this. And,
I mean, if they drink some bleach, then they're probably not just a person.
Right.
Yeah.
If they're trying to suck Jello through a straw,
But couldn't someone couldn't someone do that to give the impression they weren't, a real person?
Potentially, yeah, but obviously,
but they would die.
Well, not the Jello.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
Jello can kill you. Jello can kill you.
Yeah,
no,
yeah, Jello is famously lethal.
If you suck up your nose, you could choke on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and then your hoax turns into a bad failed jackass stunt. But
well, I had a thought about Men in Black though, and it could apply to some of the more recent theories that are out there that you hear from. I think Nick Redfern has come up with this before, and Adam Gorightly of like the kind of an MK Ultra aspect to the contactees, where there might have been some of the space visitors might have actually been government agents. It might have been like under the auspices of an MK Ultra like experiment to see if they could convince somebody that they had that kind of encounter. If the MIB or something like that. I got into the idea when I was listening to an interview with a hypnotist, and then I started researching more about like mentalists and things they're able to do. And there's such a thing as shock hypnotism, where you can just say something so strange or just unexpected, or do something so unexpected that you've shocked somebody into a suggestive state.
Right, yeah.
So that could explain why their behavior is so bizarre, because you pick up a pen and act like you've never seen one before. You've opened that channel in somebody's mind to then plant suggestions.
What did Valet talk about in one of the books? It might have been Dimensions, where he's like, he'll say something like, someone will walk around the corner, bump into you, ask you what time it is. You'll tell them, and they'll say, no, it's 4:00 when it's not. And then they'll walk off, and it leaves you in that sort of disturbed state, like something's not right.
Yeah, that's a great,
great example.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time. Where can people find you guys online?
Well, I'm on Twitter at QuirkyShark444. That's QuirkyShark444. And I am also on Instagram at Bridge to Magonia. So basically, just contact me, and then we can presumably talk about like joining the group or something.
Or the other co-founder, right? You could reach out to him.
The other co-founder, Humanoid Lord. That's the username he goes by. He's on various forums. He always uses the same one, seemingly. He didn't want to be on today, but he's definitely the he's the wind under our wings, so to speak.
You don't have a website just for the group yet.
I do, yes, but that's the one. That's the one which is unfortunately hosted by Wikia, so it doesn't look very good. But it's got the information, so I might as well recommend it.
Yeah,
which is Paranormal World Wiki. So that is So WIKI.
Is it paranormalworld.wiki?
It's actually paranormal-world.fandom.com. But again, very soon I'm gonna be moving to ghostsofmagonia.blogspot.com.
Oh, okay. Ghosts of Magonia, that's cool.
Yeah, which is much cooler and much more professional looking.
All right.
So also,
Go ahead.
Oh no! I was just going to say that I shouldn't like hoggle the contact information, and that the other two should say where they can.
Yes.
I personally abdicated all social media accounts quite a while ago. But if anyone's listening, and if you have a story for me that you think I'd be interested in, I am on Reddit. I'm always lurking in paranormal subreddits, shadow people subreddits.
Mm-hmm.
So, you might run into me on there. Who knows?
Okay.
That's the best I can do.
And as for me, you can find me on Twitter most easily. That's where I hang out a lot of the time. I post little weird tidbits every day to try to keep people entertained, especially in these weird times that we're in.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm on there as Aficionado Prodigiosus. So now you know what the AP stands for. It's at A Prodigiosus. So at APRO, I should be one of the first ones that pops up. I'm the guy with the velvet jacket that's all purple.
Where do you get that?
Or you can go to my blog at apstrange.com.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me, and I definitely want to have you back at some point.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for having us. It's great.
Yep.
Where Did the Road Go is made possible in part by help from our Patreons. And special thanks in particular to those Patreons pledging $10 or more: Allison Cook, Lindsay Trebett, Super Inframan, Tim, The Great Change, Stone Wilderness, Luke Osborne, Rob Drummond, Alex Whitcomb, Damian Tallman, Edu Camahort, Tactical Therapist, Janet Bunderson, 36 Dingo, Maria, the exceptionally talented Sam Sheeran, Jennifer Campbell, American Rambler, Jefferson Cooper, Kevin, John Rutledge Foster, Eric Citron, Andy McNamara, Matthias Sumby, Dominic O'Malley, Christopher Vaughn, Riker and Stark, Roland Belsat, Sean Cosgrove, Jose A., Roger Gonzalez, Craig Cicernos, Ray Benedetto, Linz Jackson K., Alfred Tuttle, Matthew Sproul, Kevin Schreck, Patricia Giaquinta, William Lovelace, Mark Brady, Chris 646, Carla Mahoney, and James Lattimore. Thank you all so very much. All right, we will have these guys back again at some point, and we will work on the audio quality there. I don't know what was up with it. I think it was mostly on Tom's end. I'm not really sure. I think this is the first podcast he's done. So not everyone has great equipment going into this stuff. But we will be having them join us again, so I hope you enjoyed that. All right. I did add some merch to the YouTube page. YouTube has its own merch thing. There's some different stuff there. It's the same designs, but on some different types of stuff. If you want to take a look at that, just go to the YouTube page for Where Did the Road Go? And we've been trying to put out some extra Patreon stuff and extra shows as much as possible. And I hope to continue that post-pandemic as much as possible. But people are a little more available now, which of course won't be the case when things start to return to whatever passes for normal. But using it as best we can to get some extra stuff out to everyone. If you want to become a patron and help support the show, it's only $3 a month. Go to wheredidtheroadgo.com and click on the Patreon link. You'll get extra shows and other bits and pieces throughout the month. As well, you'll get the shows before they actually go up anywhere else. So I will see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.